You're listening to Biz-Souls, the business podcast with an edge, hosted by me, Rona Lewis, and Jeffrey Hansler. Tune in for perspectives and discoveries about the changing world of business. It's time to connect to the heart, soul, and humor of how business gets done. Hi, kids, and welcome to Biz-Souls. I'm Rona Lewis.
I'm Jeffrey Hansler, and we get to the heart and soul of business and the people that make it happen.
Yay! And today we have an incredibly fun guest. Do you want to do the...
No. Daren and I met at the Kentucky Derby party held up in Murrieta.
That's right.
And
you asked him to go. So Daren Margolin is... Are you officially an immigration judge? I can't put my glasses on to see. He spent 27 years in the Marines. He was a military judge from 2000 to 2003. And after he retired, worked as an attorney for DHS ICE, representing the government in immigration court. In 2020, he became a supervisory immigration judge. In addition to hearing cases, he supervised the Adelanto San Francisco. Is that right? Did I say that correctly? Yay.
Yes.
And finally, the Orange County Immigration Court before retiring. So are you fully retired, or are you still playing in the sandbox?
I would say I'm semi-retired. I'm not doing immigration cases right now. I'm not sitting as an immigration judge, but I'm open to different ideas, and I manage to stay busy. I do some pro bono, post-conviction relief, criminal defense work. I do some commentating on TV, as you're aware of, and I've done some consulting. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the next chapter is going to look like.
Fun.
Yeah, you've been on Newsmax several times, correct?
I have.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
great. So anyway, how did this whole thing get started? What'd you want to be when you grew up? Were you playing in the schoolyard and said, "Hi, I'm going to be a lawyer"? Did some kid fall and get hurt?
Or did your parents say, "You're going to be a lawyer"?
It was a little bit like that. Well, until I guess I hit about 14, I was convinced I was going to be a professional baseball player. The only question was, what team was I going to be on? And then when I didn't make the high school team, I switched to football, and then thought, well, maybe I could do something here. And then it wasn't in the cards.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've always been athletic, still love fitness and playing golf and surfing a little bit when my body will hold up. But then I had to, it was in college and had to figure out how I'm going to earn a living and make money. And that's how I wound up where I wound up.
So did you go to school with a law degree in mind? Or did you just go to, like many of us, go into college, maybe this will turn into something?
Yeah, not at first, Jeff. I started at SUNY Albany. I know Rona's a fellow New Yorker.
Yes.
And then about halfway through, I decided I'd rather be at the beach in California. And a friend of mine was going, and I wound up at UC Irvine over near you in Orange County. And then I went from the business school to an economics degree. And then in talking with my family, they thought it might be a good idea to go to law school, and they pitched it to me, and I thought, I always kind of enjoyed political science and debate in high school, and I thought I was pretty good, and I went back to law school at New York Law School in Manhattan. And yeah, so that's how I wound up in law school.
And then we bonded on the Marines. My mom and dad were both Marines, and so
Right.
When did you enter the Marine Corps right away out of school?
Well, this was the interesting thing about it was I did right out of law school, but I did it in an unconventional way. Most Marine lawyers are actually in the Marine Corps, and they apply for a program that's basically a scholarship to go to law school. And so for me, it was a little bit different. And I would say it's probably a 50-50 split. I was getting ready to graduate from law school, and I always thought it would be cool to be in the military, wanted to serve my country. And I knew I could get really good trial experience. So in the courts in downtown Manhattan, I was always in court with judges, with the DA's office. I knew I wanted to be a litigator. And so my thinking was, well, let me go in the Marine Corps. I knew I would get felony trial experience really fast, which is exactly what happened. And then I'll do my 3 years, I'll try a bunch of cases, and I'll go back to New York City and make millions of dollars as a big-time litigator. And then 27 years later, I woke up and realized it was time to retire and had to figure out, well, now what am I going to do with the rest of my life? That's kind of the way it happened.
All right. That was great. Thanks for being here. And I'm kidding. Okay.
So I guess most of our listeners' exposure to law would be A Few Good Men, with
JAG, Judge Advocate General,
right,
stuff like that. Yeah.
And obviously it's Hollywoodized.
Yeah.
Is it like that in terms of the strict?
Yeah. Did they get it right?
I guess it's like most TV shows. There are strains and grains of truth that run through it. But of course, it's dramatized. It's made for TV. But as far as the types of cases and issues that they cover in the TV show JAG, been a while since it's been on.
Yes,
those are the types of issues that you deal with.
Yeah.
As a lawyer watching TV courtroom shows, it can be frustrating because it's not reality, but there are themes that run through these shows that are based on fact, that are in part true.
The thing that got me the most was Tom Cruise. They said he could get court-martialed for going after the colonel. Is that reality?
That's not reality. I've never. That's kind of a made for TV or the movies part of it.
Yeah.
A Few Good Men actually was a Broadway show before it got turned into a film. And I remember in law school seeing it on Broadway when I was trying to make the decision of whether I was going to join the Marine Corps or not. So it was kind of just an interesting factoid. But no, it's in the Marine Corps, but all branches of service, there's a very strong defense bar. And the reporting chain is separate, and the expectation is that your loyalty is to your client, 100% loyalty to your client. But, very similar to civilian law, California or any other state, there are rules of ethics. There are boundaries that you cannot cross. Right. But in A Few Good Men, where you've got the colonel who's kind of the bad actor, the responsibility is on Tom Cruise or the defense attorney in real life to go after that commander in defense of his client.
So the whole thing, you get court-martialed, that was the Scientology part, I guess, with Cruise. It had nothing to do with the military.
That's the Scientology made for TV part.
That's right. That's right. That's funny. So what made you focus on immigration? How'd you get into that?
Well, it kind of just happened after the first Trump election. So I guess if you go back to 2016. And what I really realized, Rona, is that when you serve in the military, and I think anybody who served a full career on active duty in the military would say similar things, is you really almost live in a bubble. You're many times, especially overseas, for example, we lived for 3 years in Japan, 1 year in Israel. I spent a year, not with my family, obviously, in Afghanistan. But you're around military people most of the time. Your value system, your ethics, your friends. You live in the safest neighborhood in America is based out on Camp Pendleton.
No doubt. No doubt.
And so when I was getting ready to retire, I initially was going into real estate, had my real estate license, wasn't crazy about it. And then during the 2016 election, immigration became a big hot topic. And in talking to successful friends of mine, mostly fraternity brothers from UC Irvine, some of them said, yeah, this immigration problem really is as big a problem as they're making it out to be. And so I just kind of watched it develop. And then Trump was elected his first administration, and they were hiring attorneys for DHS, basically prosecutors. And the pay was okay, and I thought it was interesting. And I always looked at it from a national security perspective, kind of like being a native New Yorker, going to school in downtown Manhattan, seeing 9/11. Most of the folks that committed that offense were overstays, meaning they overstayed their visa, they were in the country illegally. It is a national security issue, in my opinion, first and foremost, and that's what got me attracted to it. And so I accepted the job, I applied and accepted the job up in Adelanto, which is up in the high desert adjacent to Victorville, where there's a 2,000 bed detention facility with some pretty bad actors in there. And so that's how it happened, and I was pretty passionate about it.
Do you see yourself, so is there anything different in the military about, the immigration part had nothing to do with the Marines. That was something you did afterwards?
Exactly. It's completely unrelated. So I retired from the Marine Corps in 2016.
Okay.
In 2017, I applied for and accepted a job with the Department of Homeland Security as an attorney for them.
And how does your experience in the Marines for all the work that wasn't focused on immigration? So you were handling felony cases, misdemeanor cases as well, or predominantly felony? Do they separate the courts that way?
Well, there's something called a special court martial, which is generally misdemeanor type court, and then a general court martial, which is a felony type court. But it's the same courtroom, it's the same attorneys, it's the same judge, and very similar to what you would see in a federal court, I would say.
And were you sitting on the bench itself, or were you orchestrating all the other judges? Were you in charge and overseeing everything?
Well, in the you're
in
talking
the
about in the Marine Corps, correct? Yeah, talking about the Marine Corps, I was a sitting judge. We had 5 judges out here at the time in the Western Judicial Circuit on Camp Pendleton, and we would cover the western region of the United States. So on the topic of fun, though, I was the docketing judge, so I would assign the judges to the cases. So twice a week, I would send myself up to the northern part of Camp Pendleton so I could surf just south of Trestles and still get to court by 7:30 and do a full day of court.
Got to get your priorities in.
It was a pretty good 3-year stint on many different levels.
So I have a conceptual question. How do you think your experience as a lawyer and a judge in the Marine Corps and then afterwards, what kind of business background or expertise do you see or feel that you've gained from it?
Yeah. Well, I would say as far as being a Marine Corps trial judge, and the first part of my career was defense attorney, prosecutor, trial judge, it's really just talking to people, managing dockets, working cases. Now, in the second part of my career as, I guess, senior officer, basically a general counsel advisor, also as a commander, but then as a supervisory immigration judge, I think that experience really translates well. The reason why I say that is because when you get to the more senior levels, you have all these different functions that play into actually running an organization, whether it's a legal system. For example, for about period of about a year, I worked for General James Mattis, who later went on to become the Secretary of Defense.
Sure.
And so we're basically running a legal system, which was only, a sliver of his functions. But when you have a case where, Marines, especially in a combat zone, something bad happens, that's international news. So right. You better be pretty competent when you're working for someone like a General Mattis, and he's looking at you to make sure that these cases get handled properly. And so when you're dealing with a unit of 40,000 Marines, you've got all these different functions within the legal process. You may have general courts martial. You've got to track them and make sure that they're all running properly. You may have administrative separations. You may have officer misconduct. You may have cases or investigations for things that happen in a combat zone, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. And so I think as it would translate to business, it's just basically attention to detail, making sure your process is correct. The end state or the metric is not the bottom line, how much money you're making, but it's, are you productive? What is your productivity? Are you moving cases in a timely fashion? How quickly are they moving? How many of them are coming back on appeal because the case got reversed on appeal because of some issue? An immigration court, and I can elaborate on that if you'd like, but immigration court, even more so, even more important that all the different functions are running properly.
I'll ask it. What makes you say that?
Okay.
Yeah. Grab some water.
So in an immigration court, I covered, for example, in Adelanto, there were only 5 or 6 judges. And we had maybe 1,500 cases of gang members, serious criminals, and then some people who we just really didn't know who they were, didn't have any contacts in the United States. But then when I covered San Francisco, we had almost 100,000 cases and there were 30 judges. And then Santa Ana, when we opened the court in Santa Ana, you've got 25 judges and you've got another 40,000 cases. And at one point I was doing all 3. But if you just look at Santa Ana, you've got personalities of judges that have to be managed. So if you were the CEO of, I don't know, Qualcomm or General Motors or even a smaller company where you had 25 executives or board members that each are running their own division. It may be something as simple as, I've got a childcare issue today, and you've got 40 people waiting for their hearing, that will lead eventually to their trial. So it's managing the personality of the judges, but really the focus, kind of like with a business, the bottom line, I mean, as an investor in different publicly traded companies, you're looking at their earnings because you want to make money on your investment.
Sure.
The investment for running an immigration court is how many cases are you completing? How many cases each judge completing? Who's doing well? Who's not doing well? And it was this way in the Marine Corps, probably in any business. You wind up spending 90% of your time on 10% of where your problems really are.
Yeah, it's like project management.
So I think that's really the key is you've got to understand every step in the process, be completely engaged. There's a saying, I'm not in love with my people, or I love my Marines, but I'm not in love with them.
Right.
So sometimes you've got to take care of people, you've got to give them love, but you also have to hold them accountable.
Yeah, great point.
So, and it's not entirely about the politics, except there are some.
Except when it is.
Well, I'm trying to understand this from a judicial standpoint, and also from kind of maybe a societal. So right now we've got judges fighting the terrorists. We've got judges wanting the guys in San Salvador, the M13 or whatever group it is. They're trying to get them back, and they're saying it was illegal to deport them and stuff like that. So do judges have any foundation for doing that? And have things just gotten so political in our judicial system? There was another story about this guy who's been released on probation, and he's done all these crimes, and he just killed a girl, and he should have been in jail. And so, is our judicial system
broken?
Is it broken?
Is it broken?
And is that reflected in the military judicial system, or is the military judicial system holding up? Or anyway, kind of a long-winded question.
Yeah. Well, the military judicial system is completely different than all of this. And it's basically like a criminal court, whether it would be, Southern District of California, U.S. Attorney's Office and the courts, or the California Superior Court. So completely different. Now, within the immigration system, there are two sets of courts. There's immigration court, which is actually part of the Department of Justice that falls under the Attorney General. And that's where I was serving. But the federal district courts in the judicial branch of the United States government, they also have oversight and authority over the decisions that are being made in immigration court. And that's where these challenges and these issues are coming up now, Jeff. And these are the types of things I've been talking about on Newsmax. But one thing that is consistent for any judge in any court in America is your oath is to the Constitution, and you have to interpret the law the way the law is, not the way you want it to be. And so as a supervisor at, let's say, the Senate and Immigration Court, half of the judges that I supervised probably came from some form of government service, and the others came from private practice. So you had a complete mixture and blend of philosophies. But the one thing that I would say to every one of them is, look, as long as you stay within the boundaries of the law, you will always have my full support. But one thing you have to promise to do, and having interviewed many applicants for immigration judge positions, I would ask them, sometimes you're going to have to make hard decisions that you don't like to make because you're required to follow the law. That's the one thing that is common, regardless of what your political philosophy is you're required to follow the law.
Sure.
If you want to ask a follow-up question about the judicial branches in these high-profile cases and whether these judges are following the law, that's a separate part of the conversation.
Daren, there's a lot of stuff going on with the federal judiciary and things that are coming up. Can you tell us what the more important things are, the things that we should maybe pay attention to?
Sure. Well, what's really happening here is the current Trump administration is really pushing the boundaries, and they're going into uncharted territory regarding immigration law and how to handle people who are in the country illegally. And so you've got federal judges that are stepping in saying, no, we're not going to allow that because that's not what the statute you're relying on was designed to do. Now, the reason why the Trump administration, I believe, is doing these things is because the established immigration system does not have the capacity to handle all the cases that are out there. There are probably over 25 million people in the United States illegally.
No doubt.
10 million of whom have come in over the last 4 years. And we just don't have the resources to handle all these cases. So they've used what we call the Alien Enemies Act, and they've taken gang members Trendere Agua, for example, and some MS-13 members, and may or may not have made a mistake by taking the person that you're referring to, Jeff, Mr. Abrego Garcia, who had what we call a withholding of removal order from an immigration court, and deported him. Excuse me. So because they're pushing the limits and using the Alien Enemies Act in ways that have not been used before, judges have been stopping them because, in their opinion, they don't believe that the Alien Enemies Act was designed to handle these types of cases. So, for example, during World War II, the Alien Enemies Act was used. It was used during prior times in our history, but it was always a time of war, armed combat with another country. This is different in the sense that the argument is Venezuela, which is a hostile nation, has sent these people over, and then that constitutes an invasion. And there's significant evidence to show that that indeed is the case. But it's just different than what's happened before. So reasonable minds are going to differ. And this is being challenged right now. But because one sole federal judge has the authority to issue an injunction, they're doing that for the entire United States.
So do you think, number one, that they're pushing the envelope in terms of negotiation? Because, ask for 100%, settle for 80, or, and yes, I do happen to agree that some bad people got in, and I think there's a bunch that got in because of fear of what's going on in their own countries. And there are also jobs that Americans don't want to do that we use, others who are not documented to do. So there's a lot of back and forth on it. So, how do you look at the overall picture?
Well, I think, unfortunately, the American people are the victims of Congress's inability to do their jobs. Mm-hmm. And there are national security threats out there, but at the same time, we've basically incentivized people to come here for decades. Mm. I remember as a college student in UC Irvine realizing that this was an issue 40 years ago. But in the law, we called it willful blindness. We don't pay attention to it, even though we know it's illegal, because we need the workforce.
Right.
I think really what needs to happen, Rona, and I'm convinced, and without mentioning names, a friend of mine who's a member of Congress said to me, Daren, we could fix this by Monday. It's just politics.
Right.
We need the workforce.
Yeah.
Do something like have companies register for work permits. Have Congress cut a deal so that if you've been in this country for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years without a criminal record, you're eligible for a work permit and you can contribute, but you're out of the shadows. On the other hand, if you're a criminal, and we would see cases, Rona and Adelanto, where you've had people with 15 to 20 page rap sheets with 5 to 10 felony convictions who are still in the United States. These folks shouldn't be here.
Correct.
If you're a gang member, and there are 2 million deportation orders signed by judges. I've signed hundreds of them myself that are unexecuted.
Why do you think that is?
Let's start there and focus on these folks.
Yeah.
But I think you've got to cut some sort of deal, and the American people, us, the taxpayers, are the ones that suffer.
Right. Yeah, that's we were talking about this before. I truly believe, I'm very disillusioned by politics in general. I think the system is broken, and I think too many politicians are there to keep their jobs as opposed to serve the American people. So I'm very disillusioned. So. What's your,
So
what do you
we're
think,
gonna
Jeffrey?
we're gonna have to.
Yeah. So notice he's not putting his opinion in now.
We're gonna have to have you back on this. And just one comment, and then I want to ask how people can get hold of you. Yeah. And yeah, so the one of the things that Elon Musk said. So he's just left the Doge team, and he said he was flabbergasted by the amount of bureaucracy. It absolutely amazed him. And so what I'm hearing in you is these things could be fixed. Our politicians are no longer working for the American people. It sounds like.
I just said that.
Yeah, well, I was.
That was me.
Yeah, I'm in agreement on you, and we've got that. We've even got in local politics here. I mean, they're bureaucrats that are getting in.
Yeah.
Not people that actually want to try and do something for the American people. So any comment on how we could get out of this? How can we get control of our politicians?
Yeah, well, that's an incredibly complex question, and I'm kind of with Rona on this. 90% lost faith in our politicians because I agree. I think they're in it for themselves and not for what's best for the American people. There is a way out of it. Congress has to do their job, and the only way they're going to solve this immigration problem is they're going to have to cut a deal. I just hope that it doesn't get to the point where there's some mass terrorist attack by a bad actor, and the bad actors are here.
Yeah.
Just look at the protests that are going on at Columbia, at Harvard. And so some of the folks that have been detained, they're professional agitators. Some of them are here illegally outright, or they committed fraud in the application process.
Or they're students.
I'm sorry?
Or they're students.
Yeah, or they're students. Chinese, I mean, we've known for decades, right? The Chinese have been stealing our intellectual property and infiltrating our universities and our countries. So my whole mantra on this is we have to bring it out of the shadows. We have to know who's in the country, and we have to eliminate the national security threat. But Congress is the only one that can genuinely deal with the problem of, let's say, 25 million people who are in here without status. The other point of your question regarding Elon Musk, and I know that you did a podcast on this several weeks ago, I am of the opinion, not so much that in the Department of Defense, but it does exist, the fat that can be cut out in the Department of Defense as well. At the higher levels, rank structure, but also there's overlap in the services, sometimes for good reason. If we go into a full-blown war, we may need that capability that's duplicative in both, let's say, the Army and the Marine Corps. But what I saw in the Department of Justice, and one of the main reasons I left, it is completely broken. People at the head, and I imagine in the immigration court section of the Department of Justice, if it's there, it's in all these other agencies in the government as well. Folks that have been hired to do a certain job that contributes nothing to the mission, but it contributes to them maintaining their job, that pulls guys like me in the position I'm in, instead of focusing on my judges and how we're going to complete 40,000 cases, focusing on some, low-level administrator, the task that they gave me to complete by the end of the day that's now going to consume my whole day. Those are the people that need to be eliminated. I love what Elon Musk and Doge did and has been doing. I do wish they used a little more of a scalpel than a sledgehammer, but it's something that does need to be done in my view.
Excellent. And how, if people need to get a hold of you, if some smart politician wants to hire you to get you on the bench again?
Yeah, well, everything's open for negotiation. And I would say probably my email address, which is Margolin, Margolin, DK@yahoo.com, is the best way. I do have plans maybe later this year to maybe start a small law firm or consulting firm, and I'll circle back with you as that develops.
Yeah,
but we're not quite there yet. I'm still in the transition phase.
Oh, that's very exciting.
Yeah,
very exciting. And we're definitely going to have you back.
Yeah, this was such a fun conversation. Thank you. I learned things today. I always like when I learn things. So thank you so much, Daren. And thank you, Jeffrey, for arranging this. That's it for today. I'm Rona Lewis.
I'm Jeffrey Hansler.
And this has been Biz-Souls. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
You've been listening to the Biz-Souls Podcast with your hosts, Rona Lewis and Jeffrey Hansler. Did you have fun? Subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. Talk to you next week.